All right, now we're going to start sculpting the clothing. So firstly, I want to export my original costume and my new costume topology as separate OBJs. Bring in my all my OBJs as subtools. So then I have my new topology and my old topology with all the detail. And I'm just using polygrouping by UV in order to get some good polygroups in there. What I'm doing here is on my skirt mesh, I made a morph target on the lowest level, and as I smoothed, the belt and the main skirt started to separate. So I'm just painting that morph target back in, and then kind of, masking out part of it to move elements of that back up so that it doesn't make a hole. So just using Move Tool to do that. And as I divide, I'm using Project All at a distance of 0.02, and that should do it. I'm doing the same technique for the shirt right now, where I've divided it up and I've projected, and I kind of go up one level at a time and then adjust my topology and then project once more. I do that for every single level that I divide it at, just to keep it clean and controlled. So now I'm just moving some of the topology over to make sure it's nice and even, and then reprojecting on a lower res. Just moving some of the edge loops down to make it a bit more even. And then projecting one more time. Smoothing out some of the projected detail that isn't quite as smooth as I'd like it to be. And now I can start really smoothing out my my newest topology and really get into detailing and sculpting in some clothing wrinkles. So I'm just bringing in some of the tapering using my hide by group feature. Shift, Control, Click will hide any other polygroups that you have. So that's why I use polygroups so often. So I have the control to do that. And I'm just smoothing out all of the messy detail that came from the Marvelous Geo, because I'm planning on doing some of my own wrinkles within ZBrush. All right, I'm just fixing some of the topology again and reprojecting. And now what I can do is smooth out some of these areas. I'm going to export these buttons and then append them so I can see where the buttons are lying, so I can sculpt some wrinkles under there. Okay, so now I'm just going to start smoothing and sculpting and reinforcing some of these wrinkles that came with my model. Just smoothing out some detail, polygrouping by UV. Just masking and polygrouping the way I want, where I want the sleeves to be the same polygroup, the back, the yoke. And that way I can polygroup hide and then mask just the sleeve and really make a quick seam raise. I'm just using Clay Tool and Move to raise up the parts that aren't masked. Doing the same thing for the button strip here, and also for the collar. And what I did there was just use Deformation Inflate to just get that automatic detail from the masking. This is one of the great advantages of using Marvelous, is to have seams perfectly where they're supposed to be going, and UVs that work perfectly with those seams. Okay, now I'm just kind of raising up that area even further and just smoothing out some of these wrinkles that I don't like so much. I think some of the detail would be better if I had a higher res export from Marvelous. But it's good because I can just easily customize some detail here. Okay, so I'm masking out the bottom of the skirt so I can easily get a nice seam line. Just like that. And I'm just enhancing all of my seams. All right, I'm sculpting in some of the larger wrinkles of the shirt, you know, just making sure to add a nice volume and draping effect. I use clay and Display Special quite a bit at this stage. Just going over the same wrinkles, making sure that my tension points are being taken care of. And that I'm getting the right amount of wrinkles for this kind of shirt too. So I'm using a lot of photo reference as well from my character sheet, and also looking up this type of shirt and how the wrinkles would fall on this kind of pose. And just taking care to kind of, you know, make marks that make sense at this stage. There's a lot of nice, sleeve wrinkles. It's a lot looser as it tucks into the waist. And there's a lot of tension at arms, at the armpits. So I'm using my standard special just to enhance some of these wrinkles. And I'm just making sure that the flow is working and I'm not, stopping the flow of a wrinkle halfway. I'm trying to make sure that flow of the wrinkle keeps continuing. Now just adding a bit of tension where the buttons are pinned. Just quickly adding some fabric stuff, the fabric effects. You know, if you look at your own shirt, when you see this, you'll see a lot of tension coming from those areas. And I'm just moving this over to match the button. Just enhancing these seam lines. And I'm going to keep doing that for every new sculpting pass on the clothing. It's really nice to be able to spot those seams from a far distance. So I might go a little extreme with them, but in the end it pays off because for a medium res character, you're going to want to see those things pop from a distance. So now I'm just using Polypaint to darken that a little bit, just to make it easy on the eyes to imagine what the design might be in the end. And I'm just focusing on the sleeves only at the moment. I'm just continuing to enhance the wrinkles that I've already laid down. Again, making sure that the flow kind of goes around the sleeve. Trying to make it so it doesn't just stop in the middle of nowhere. And just going over the yoke now. Making sure that can be seen from afar. And I like to raise up the seams quite a bit when I'm doing this. You know, if you look at a stiff shirt, you can see the seams raised quite a bit because it's separate pieces of fabric and separate fabric thicknesses, you know, between some of this stuff, like between the cuffs and the sleeves and the collar. And right now I'm just, I'm making a mask so I can easily make a nice seam line on the front of the shirt, to make it look like a little bit like it's been tailored. It's a nice quick way to achieve some seam lines. I'll sometimes do that to jeans as well for the front piece of fabric. So now I'm enhancing that front bit where the buttons go again. Enhancing those seam lines I started. Just making sure they're looking nice. Getting the side seams sorted. I'm going to sculpt in some cuff wrinkles. Pay attention a little bit more to the sleeves. Get the drapery on the lower back a bit looser. And I just keep going over the same areas again and again. Every time I see an area that isn't quite balanced, then I'll go and take care of that area. So now I'm just, again, with the repetition, going over the sleeves again, you know, and this just takes several iterations and passes to go through. And you'll see me go over the same areas over and over again. Just because, you know, as time keeps going, the better and better pieces of your model are getting. So you're going to want to keep up that level of quality all around as you keep going. I'm just using standard special, smoothing a lot, and making sure that, you know, I'm not getting too carried away with wrinkles, that they still look natural and that my seams are really popping, because that's really what's important. And the whole point of using Marvelous is to have these kinds of collar seams and all the fabric kind of working the way it should realistically. Again, enhancing the sleeves, making sure the cuffs look good, getting that drape working in the back. And now I'm hitting the skirt. And I'm just going to add a few bit of wrinkles and details. I don't want to add too much on the skirt since it's kind of a thicker piece of fabric. So I just want to make sure that it's, you know, it has a nice bit of breakup and wrinkle detail, but that it's not overwhelmed with wrinkles, because really the drapery part came 100% from Marvelous with the, you know, with the curling of the skirt. So now what I'm doing is I brought my mesh back in, level 1, and I'm extruding in Maya. So I just do a straight up extrude, and then I add a edge in between each extrude. So I know I can move off the interfaces onto another UV tile. And that way I can, and I'm just fixing some stuff that's poking through. So now that I have my outer faces in one UV tile and my interfaces in another one, it's really easy for me to select those interfaces and delete if I need to later to optimize. But we definitely want some of the fabric to have thickness so that it looks as realistic as possible. So now I'm just doing the same thing with the shirt. I'm going to extrude it, add a seam, an edge loop in between. Flip my normals, and then select all my shells that are reversed, and then move them over one UV tile. And now I have both that and my shirt ready to go. And when I import my shirt and skirt again, it's going to be real easy for me to polygroup it based on the front faces and the back faces, and just start to reproject on the sculpture that I've already done. So I've hidden everything in the back face, and I'm just projecting the front faces onto my sculpted skirt model, and just going through each level, projecting, and then cleaning up. So once I've projected all the detail I want, after I get all the way through my divisions, then I can delete my quote unquote scans or my sculptures that I've done, and just replace them with my new meshes. And now I'm going to repeat the same things for the shirt. I'm using Polygroup's UV groups, and that gets you one side of the UVs is one polygroup, and the next tile is the other polygroup. I also brought in a morph target. I use that a lot just in case my mesh gets weird when I start dividing it. So now I'm just projecting my front faces onto my new shirt mesh. And now my shirt and skirt have all the detail I've just sculpted, and they have thickness. So now I can continue to sculpt, but I probably won't do such extreme movements unless I have my brush settings a certain way. So I'm just adding smaller details now, details that aren't going to really push through the thickness of the shirt. You're going to make sure you want to pretty much get to that point before you extrude your clothing mesh in Maya. You can also extrude your clothing mesh in ZBrush as well, using the Z Modeler tool, but I just prefer to do it in Maya so I can automatically have my UVs separated onto a different shell. It's just cleaner for me to do it that way. So I'm just cleaning up my mesh, making sure those back faces aren't peeking through. If you want to sculpt on the front face and not have your brush affect the back face, you're just going to want to turn off back face mask in your brush settings, masks. And now I just keep going over smaller details, things that aren't going to really rough up my silhouette too much, or the sculpture I've already made. Just adding more detail on top. I'm going to try to get that collar seam to work the way I want. Sharpening that mask, and I'm just going to use inflate and then kind of clay and inflate to make that seam enhanced. And now I'm using standard special to kind of carve in the seam, and then make that collar seamed area pop a bit using display special. These are just techniques to make thicker bits of material pop, especially from a distance. Again, going over the seams. You're going to see me do that a ton. They're just so important at every stage to keep reinforcing that these seams are here. And it's just going to make your sculpture look even more realistic. And I'm not super heavy-handed about it. I just want to have a nice sharp, crisp line at each seam. And as I go, I just keep sharpening and making the line more crisp and more crisp. I'm also trying to be aware of whether or not a piece of the fabric is thick versus a thin piece. So the collar would be a bit thicker, and so would the cuffs. So that's why they get an extra layer of sculptural detail around the edges. All right, again with the seams. Just gonna keep sculpting that stuff, all right? So now what I'm gonna do is just start polypainting my skin. And all I'm doing is I'm using my standard brush and with RGB on only, intensity at 41. I've filled my entire layer with a certain level of gray. And I'm painting on eyebrows, a hairline, and some skin tones, but it's all grayscale. It's just to try to, to sell the concept or the design and sell the character a bit. So I always like doing this step, even though it's not really going to be used for final texture. I really just use it so I can sell a concept. Maybe not even to my art director, but just to myself, that this is looking really good. I'm going to add a little layer of eyeshadow. And when I draw in the eyebrows, that really helps too. Just keeping aware of where the eyebrows are sitting on the face. So now I'm just going to paint some pink on the caruncle, tear duct area, and then bake a toy plastic material onto the eyes, just to make it look like it's wet. And I'm just baking a certain gray tone on the shirt and the skirt. Just going to take a look at the design, see if it's working for me. Then I'm just going to run a quick detail pass, a little just some alpha noise, using the standard special brush with the spray, just to get kind of a noise pattern for where the hairline might be. And I'm just adding some tone on the lips, on the cheeks, and on the top of the head. And I'm masking out some of the hair just to break up that silhouette a bit, to make it look like the hair is raised just a bit. And all I'm doing right now is poly painting stuff, just to make it look nice. Making a few minor moves on the shirt. All right, and just trying to get in some last minute details on the skirt and shirt. I'll probably continue poly painting for a bit, maybe add some white on the collar and the cuffs, and maybe paint in some of the eyes. But those are my techniques, just quickly poly paint something to test to see if the design of the character is going to work out. All right, let's move on.